welcome back to the final Boropolis podcast of the season. We've got an awful lot to get into. We've got that awful final day to talk about. Judging by the time we're recording this, we'll probably try and skip over that, to be honest. It's been and gone now. We want to talk about the future, talk about Chris Wilder's comments, some of the potential ins and outs that have already been rumoured and confirmed since the end of that Preston game, and just overall reflect on, of course, the season, but also reflect on the first year of this podcast. So, Nathan, for the final time this season, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Of course, we wish we were here with a few more podcasts to go, but that wasn't to be the case with Saturday's results. But we'll get this this chat underway. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, as you say there.
Yeah, I should say, because this will probably be going out on Thursday night. Final week of uni, so I do any abuse that you may want to aim at us. It is not Nathan's fault at all. I've just been a very busy man trying to frantically type up word counts, so that's why we are slightly late. But moving on from that, that's out the way now. Over and back to the Preston game, as much as we don't want to talk about it, Nathan. We should probably remind ourselves of the situation going into the final day. Of course, after the last podcast we recorded, Luton had just been trounced off Fulham 7-0. We all thought, we're going to sneak in here. There's two places up for grabs. At that point, you know, you're starting to really think it's going to work out. I mean, how naive to think that it wasn't going to be typical Middlesbrough and it wasn't going to go to plan. Of course, we needed to win regardless of any results. For example, Sheffield United could have been beat 8-0 off Fulham, and Luton could have been beat 9-0 off Reading. But had we have not won, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. And in the end, the results both went the way of Sheffield United and Luton, and ironically went completely against us, Nathan. It was probably as close to a disaster of a final day scenario as that we probably dreaded going into the final game of the season.
Yeah, it wasn't great, was it? There was a lot of optimism in that away end before kick-off. I think everyone was in a bit of a party spirit anyway, not getting too carried away with what was going on the pitch, but just sort of celebrating the season that we've had, being back in grounds as well, of course. But yeah, at the end of the day, the results didn't matter because the Borough didn't do the business that we wanted them to do. Only one change in the starting 11. Peltier out from the Stoke game and McNair back in after illness. But yeah, the early signs looked slightly positive with Borough having most of the ball early on. Not creating too much with it going forward. I can't really remember a chance in the first half, if I'm honest, for Middlesbrough. But yeah, the sucker punch early on was the beginning of a truly awful afternoon.
Yeah, it was. And at that stage, I can't fully remember, to be honest. But I think at that time, Sheffield United may have already scored. And of course, that was already being sort of whispered around the away end. And everyone was thinking, well, you know, we can still rely on Luton. Obviously, we didn't need to rely on anyone because we were shooting our own selves in the foot. The goal comes from a cross into the box. I think it's Crooks and Fry that go for the same ball. They both miss the ball. It ends up at the feet of Alan Brown, of course, Preston's skipper. And in fairness to him, probably, you know, from our point of view, some poor defending, but actually a great finish, to be fair, on the half volley.
Yeah, it was. Brad Potts puts that ball in from the right-hand side. And yeah, as you say, Crooks and Fry both caught out with the ball's delivery, both caught underneath the ball, and it sort of bounces up off Brown, and he does fantastically well to sort of steer it in the far corner. A fantastic finish. He shushed the away end that there was more fans in than the full other three stands of Deepdale. But yeah, it was an early sucker punch. And to be fair, going into the game, whilst everyone was thinking about what other teams were going to do, I kind of just thought to myself, well, it's not sort of granted that we're going to win here today. It's their last game in front of their fans for the season as well. And yeah, they turned up, and a few weeks ago I was listening to a podcast on Under the Cosh, chatting to a guy called Craig Davis, who used to play up front for Bolton, and he described a similar story when he was at Bolton and they were playing Blackpool, and Blackpool turned up at Bolton on the final day and just wiped the floor with them, and he described them as busy bastards. And I think that's fair to describe Preston on this afternoon.
Yeah, I think, do you know what, that fits accordingly. I know obviously a lot of talk around sort of going into the final game with Preston with nothing to play for, but of course with Ryan Lowe as their manager, and of course, you know, they've built from a position where probably they were never really going to go down, but at one stage or another they were probably looking over the shoulder and thinking, well, we need to start picking up points here. Of course, they managed to swiftly turn that round and really have got some exciting players in that team that you know, are both loan and permanent. Of course, we'll get onto their front two, which is, you know, the real standout point for them. But as you say, Preston fancied themselves just to really end the sort of party atmosphere that Middlesbrough fans were creating in that away end. As you say, 1-0 down. Not long after that, you start to think, right, okay, Borough glasses off, realism glasses on, and realise this is massively typical Borough. Daniel Johnson then floats in a corner to the near post, and under somewhat of a challenge from Cameron Archer, I think it is, Luke Daniels falls into his own goal. And do you know what? I thought it was 2-0. I hadn't realised until pretty much Daniels had put the ball back down to take the free kick for the foul that the referee had given it. I think head in hands mode was fully activated at this point. And, you know, I looked back at it and I actually thought, okay, it's possibly a little bit generous to Daniels, but I'm not actually sure it is a foul, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a strange one. I thought it had counted when I was at the ground, with the referee pointing back to halfway. I thought, oh my God, he's given the goal. Couldn't believe it. But yeah, Borough, lucky escape. Daniels, lucky escape. But delivery was fantastic from Johnson, especially considering it was a outswinging corner. He's literally fizzed it in right on Daniels within about 4 yards of the goal line, and all it needed was the slightest touch forward. Again, fitting the sort of words that I described Preston with earlier on in the podcast, just almost like showboating against the Borough on Saturday afternoon. But yeah, following that, Borough sort of failed to create anything, failed to get back into the game, and a ball down Borough's right-hand side. Emil Rees chasing that ball. Johnny Howson's chasing him back and gets a nick on it. Jones gets back as well, and it's in the corner, and you think, got to deal with this. Get rid of it and clear up the line. Emil Rees somehow sort of spins with a back heel between Howson and Jones and finds his way into the Borough penalty area, and sort of a cross-come shot across the face of goal is diverted in from Dale Fry. Now, I didn't want to say this in the last podcast before, well, in our sort of opposition preview, but to my knowledge, every single time Emil Rees has played Middlesbrough, he scored. So, yeah, just thrilling, really. But yeah, again, a poor goal to concede. There's no way that Reece should get out the corner. There's no way that the ball should be diverted into our own net either, really. Either Fry deals with it accordingly or Daniels claims it as I think he tried to by diving across the face of goal. But yeah, a poor goal to concede, and that was that. I think from then on, all hope had faded.
Yeah, I think you're right. And just touching on the goal, to be honest, it was probably more frustrating that actually I think it's Housen that gets to the ball first. And I think he almost tries to take a touch to then swing at it and clear it. And Reece wins it back. And it's just in that area, as you say, as soon as that goes in, it was, I mean, the whole away end just, despite later on being probably the loudest thing in, Preston for years, it was, it went flat for a few minutes and rightfully so, because that took the life out of us. Around about that time, I think Sheffield United had already got their second as well. And the lad that I went to the game with, I spoke to him as the goal had just gone in and we were trudging back to take the kick off at 2-0 down. And I just said, do you know what? It feels a little bit like Wembley, this, because 2 goals in quick succession. We already kind of know it's over now. At least it gives us the rest of the game to sort of accept how dreadful of a start that we've had and how dreadful of a performance it turned into. And to be honest, if you want to look at it in that way and pick out the smallest positive that there could possibly be, I actually didn't feel as bad walking away from the ground because I'd already sort of accepted it as soon as we went 2-0 down. Yeah, it was, as we've said, the worst possible start to the game that we could have. Do you know what? I honestly thought, and I'd class myself as a bit of a pessimistic Middlesbrough fan. I just didn't envisage it at all. I knew, of course, it was never going to be an easy game, but I really did not see that coming at all. It massively took me by surprise. And we just completely froze, didn't we, on the all-important day. And then really, from that point, I thought, well, it's 2 now. It could be 4 or 5 this. And, of course, it ended up being 4. But it certainly could have been more. Ali McCann went through not long after that, fizzed one across the face of the goal. It must have been inches wide from nestling into the far corner past Daniels. And then we somehow get into half-time, still 2 goals down, and pretty much just as the players are walking off the pitch, heading down the tunnel, I heard the whisper of Luton are winning. Now, at this stage, I wasn't aware of the actual goal that Luton had scored. Now it's all over. I must say, Oliver Nyland, what you are doing in that incident is baffling. I've got it doesn't even matter for us anymore, but I just, it's the stuff of kids football. He hasn't looked behind him. Harry Cornick's just walked past, went, "See you later, mate. Cheers very much." Stuck it in the back of the net. And you do think, did Nyland maybe have a cheeky tenner on Luton to make the playoffs before the game? It certainly looked that way, didn't it?
Yeah, it's a funny goal. It's one of them where, although it doesn't impact us, now it's funny. If it did impact us, it would be the least funny thing ever. But I've had earlier on in the season when we had Louis Roberts on, the Reading fan on the Reading preview, he was at the game on Saturday afternoon, and he said it was the most sort of comedic goal ever because in the away end at Kenilworth Road, all the Reading fans are saying, like, he's behind you, almost pantomime-esque, and Kenilworth Road was just silent because they knew that Cornick was behind him and they knew that he was going to sort of roll that ball out to clear it. But yeah, very pantomime-esque, but thankfully it didn't impact Middlesbrough in a negative way, really, because we inflicted the negativity on ourselves in our own performance.
Yeah, we did. One positive from the day, and probably even the most optimistic of Middlesbrough fans probably thought there's no chance. We did pull a goal back fairly quickly after half time. And actually it was something, a point that I, again, with the lad Lewis that I was with at the game, I said it almost asked a few questions when we scored that goal, because the goal comes from, okay, some neat work around the edge of the box and something that we've become used to under Chris Wilder. But Anthony Dijksteel just, instead of trying to intricately pass it, just actually thinking, well, let's put their back line under a little bit of pressure, get the ball in the box and see what comes of it. Now, I'm not saying that I want us to do that all the time, but certainly I felt like towards the end of the season, especially at times, we were trying to walk the ball into the goal. And, you know, I understand it's better to be patient, certainly throughout that period during Christmas, where it seemed like we'd go from side to side to side and then slip Jones in, cut it back, and we'd score. Or we scored so many goals that way. But towards the end of the season, it almost felt a little bit too intricate at times. And when Dijksteel crosses that in, you know, it puts the Preston defence under the most pressure that they've been under all day. Tav Ghosties in at the back post, adds another to his tally. Great header, in fairness, from a very tight angle. Tries to get that away and going for a real one last push. You know, surely we can't do it. The optimism slowly is almost creeping back in. And then minutes later, Riley McGree is caught. I mean, I think Sparrow initially probably was about to be caught with the ball at his feet. He sort of passes the blame on, passes the ball to Riley McGree. McGree's tackled, Preston then attack from that. And Reese is then slipped in behind, dinks it over Luke Daniels, and the 2-goal deficit's back. And at that point, I just slumped in my chair and thought, well, if it wasn't done before, it definitely is now.
Yeah, that's exactly how it was, wasn't it? They give you that sliver of hope that you're going to get back into the game, and it's quickly just ripped away from you. Just sort of like a that's what you get for being so stupid to think that we were going to get back into the game. Yeah, we were throwing men forward, in all fairness. McGree's caught on it, and I'm pretty sure within 3 passes, the ball's in the back of our net, because there was that much space for Preston to break into. Yeah, fantastic ball into Reese. Dijksteel sort of doesn't know whether to go with Reese initially or stay in his position. And in the end, he does neither. And Reese is all alone, pretty much. Fantastic finish as well to him, in all fairness. Going away from goal at a tight angle. And yeah, he dinks it over Daniels beautifully. And game dead and buried. Borough were obviously going to be chasing from then on, still trying to conjure something up, and it just left us open defensively, especially with the changes made, bringing all centre forwards on, Coburn, Connolly and Balogun all featuring in the second half, and unfortunately all offering pretty much nothing really, especially following the fourth, which, yeah, Cameron Archer, Preston's other forward, coming in off Preston's left-hand side, fires that shot past Daniels. McNair is on the line, and initially I thought, what a fantastic block that is to get that away. Didn't know he'd done it. On reflection, what a save.
Yeah, it's a great save, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic save. Palms that out for a corner, or what would have been. And Yeah, referee goes over with him, sends him off, second yellow, for a fight in the first half. Well, I say a fight, a little bit of a,
It was handbags, wasn't it?
yeah,
Really?
daft sort of handbags in the first half between himself and Sepp van der Berg. But yeah, Preston have a penalty. Reece is on, I'd say probably
2.5 goals.
2.5, yeah, 2.5, 2.5, but technically a hat trick. Gets the penalty, sends Daniels the wrong way, slots it in, 4-1 down. 4-1 would hate to be a Middlesbrough fan.
Yeah, if you, I'm sure we were dishing out the old 4-1 after the Derby game. Got to fully accept that we deserve it after that final day showing. Yeah, I think that just summed it up, really, that red card. Paddy McNair, he's been, fairly exceptional for the majority of the season. And do you know what? I probably would have done the same. It, like you say, in the away end, I thought that's an unbelievable block. Fair play. I mean, in hindsight, obviously, and once seeing the replays back, I thought maybe Paddy McNair might have a career going into boxing because he almost right hooks that away. And yeah, I mean, deserved penalty, deserved sending off. And from that point on, probably something that sounds a little bit ridiculous now, the party really started in the away end after the fourth. The real shining light, positive, whatever you want to call it, from going to Preston away, that away following. Of course, we all deserved better, but certainly I think we made the best out of a bad situation. All the Preston fans were full of compliments on how great the away section was, and even like a few other teams this season come away singing about the fact that Cruxy's hair is fine, despite not being in any way related to Cruxy's hair. And I should also add that should never change. It should only ever be Middlesbrough fans until the day he retires singing about his hair being fine. But yeah, I guess we've got to touch on the away end because that was the positive, wasn't it, Nathan? It was remarkable, to be fair, and it just felt like at that point, we were almost just showing our support for next season, showing, well, we're going to be there next season, so let's just start getting ready for it now, type of thing.
Yeah, it was. Seeing the photos back of the away end, seeing just that sea of red, it was fantastic to see. But the support all seasons is ridiculous. This club, in terms of its size and stature, may not be the biggest, only a little town up north with big clubs up there with us, Sunderland and Newcastle, although Sunderland are in the third tier at the minute. We could be playing them next season, but there you go. Yeah, up there with big clubs like that, teams around us, Sunderland, Leeds, Newcastle, people may choose to support them, but our support is absolutely fantastic. Again, the stat came out the other day, highest average away attendance in the division, and we have to travel miles more than any other club in the division, really. A lot said about Forest and Sheffield United's away support and other sides, but when you factor in the extra miles that have to be put in every week by Borough fans, it's a no-brainer who the best support in the division is, and they proved it once again on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and it was, weirdly enough, considering the circumstances and the scoreline, it was actually probably one of my favourite moments of the season. Like I say, it was 4-1 down. At that point, everyone, of course, knew it was all over. But I think Wilder said afterwards it was an away end showing their love for the club. But it felt more than that. It was people showing their love for the club, but showing that, everyone's bought into this project, and credit to Chris Wilder, since he's come in, he's, completely galvanised the whole fan base. And we've talked about this throughout the last few podcasts about the change in support and, you know, the togetherness that's probably been missing for a few years, actually. And yeah, it just felt like the away end were almost thanking the players for their efforts, but just saying, you know, we're going to show what we have to offer next season. And, you know, and now it's time, okay, as Chris Wilder always says, there won't be certain players on the journey next season. But all of that away end certainly will be on the journey. And you know, we all showed our excitement for it, and it made me excited more than anything, to be honest.
Yeah, and really, I think it's fair to say that everyone can't wait for that journey next season. Already less than a week since the season is finished, and I can't wait for the next one already. These next 3 months are going to be a long 3 months, but yeah, we can't wait for it. We've shown signs this season since Wilder's coming of what's to come. There's been fantastic moments that I think we'll get into a little bit later on. But yeah, this team's shown a lot of improvements since the start of this season to now. And I think it's fair to say that there's a bright future for Middlesbrough Football Club.
Yeah, there certainly is. So I think that's enough on Preston. We never really wanted to talk about the result anyway. But actually, probably the most interesting thing of the full day was the quite remarkable comments. And, you know, I must say, probably one of the best end of season interviews from a Middlesbrough manager I can ever remember. Not long after kick-off, Chris Wilder done his usual interview with BBC Tees and, of course, reflected on the season, but also outlined his intentions, made a few, you know, real standout quotes that got everyone sort of thinking about what the shape of the squad might look like after the retain list was announced. Firstly, in terms of the two standout quotes, I think the first one, attitude over ability, we'll cover that first. A lot of people quickly, you know, speculated as to who he meant about that. And I don't think it would be fair to pinpoint, you know, attitude over ability, because, I mean, let's be honest, we don't really have that sort of access to know what everyone's attitude and application is like. But certainly it was encouraging, because I think Wilder knows what characters he wants, and I think he will bring them in the summer.
Yeah, it's important not to be pinpointing anyone. At the minute, we don't know what's gone on behind the scenes or what Wilder's seen that he doesn't like. But yeah, he certainly knows what he wants to bring into this football club. He knows the type of players and the type of characters that he wants at this football club, and he knows, most importantly, what type of characters are needed to be in a successful dressing room. Of course, done it before. We all know what Wilder's track record's been like with promotions out of this division and other divisions as well. So he's got experience in knowing what sort of successful dressing rooms needs. And I'm sure that he'll be backed in the summer to get those characters in.
Yeah, he certainly will. And then the other quote, of course, which we thought we should pull out of that interview, there will be surprises, of course, since recording. We have seen the retained list, and we'll also get onto that. But I think probably the actual retained list wasn't much of a surprise. I think most people considered that comment to be the players that are contracted, I should say, and who may not be on that journey. So, of course, we don't know yet. I know previously Wilder's been a manager that usually releases a transfer list, as he sort of not officially did, but come out to the press in January and admitted who was available for transfer and did it in that sort of way. But that hasn't come out yet. But if we look at it from what he said and what perhaps we both think, is there any players that spring to mind in terms of a surprise that we think from the contracted players, which may be who he's referring to?
I'm not entirely sure on outfield players, but it's sort of come to light that the goalkeeping situation is going to be a big area that improvements are needed in the summer. Sort of come out in a few rumours this week that Joe Lumley and Luke Daniels, both contracted to the football club, are going to be made available for transfer. I think one of those is certainly fair. The other, you can see that you can see why change may be wanted, although he may be used as a good backup, Luke Daniels. But yeah, I think that's going to be a big area for us to improve on. Links are already starting to be made around Carl Darlow from Newcastle. Of course, had experience in the Championship before with them and with Nottingham Forest a few years ago. And also links to Daniel Everson, who, of course, was in goal for Preston North End at the weekend. Made a fantastic save from a header from Watmore, I think it was. A flick on at the near post. But yeah, decent shot stopper, Daniel Everson. He was on loan at Preston, so he's contracted to Leicester. But yeah, keepers will be an issue, and as you say, they're players that I think will be made available that are contracted. Certainly the two goalkeepers.
Yeah, and then moving on from the goalkeepers, because I think, okay, possibly the surprise element of that would possibly be Luke Daniels, because I think it's kind of been made aware that, you know, one of Chris Wilder's number one signings in the summer is going to be a first choice goalkeeper. But I thought that Daniels would likely be kept around, and he still may be, but I felt that he may be kept around as a backup or a little bit of competition for whoever comes in as number one. Looking throughout the team, I think in terms of players that are contracted and will move on, I look at Grant Hall. Since Chris Wilder's come in, I think he's been on the bench a handful of times, but apart from that, he hasn't been involved at all. So I think, again, probably doesn't really fall in the surprise category. I think he'll be one that will depart. Immediately for me, I don't know if you thought this as well, and this is purely based off my own sort of gut feeling, I guess you could call it. My mind straight away went to Mark Bowler, and you know, since the retained list has come out, of course, we've had another wing back leave the club, and we'll get onto that as well. But immediately I thought, well, you know, Mark Bowler, arguably under Warnock, was probably one of our first names on the team sheet, really, most weeks when he was fit. Since Wilder's come in, he hasn't quite hit the ground running the way probably we thought he might. Of course, he had that injury. And actually, it's, you know, a little bit of a surprise, because I think we both said earlier on this season when Wilder was appointed that Bowler's attributes going forward probably suited the wing-back system more, but it just hasn't quite worked out there. And, you know, being on the bench for the last few games of the season, that's one player that I think would be somewhat of a surprise. And I do fear for Mark Bowler's future at Middlesbrough.
Yeah, I think I agree with you with that one. Just because he's been available for the last few weeks, and Wilder's opted to play Marcus Tavernier in that wing-back position, it's sort of, you can either see it as that tells a story in terms of he fancies Tavernier over Bowler in that position, and Tavernier is not even a left wing-back, or he wants more creativity in that midfield with McGree, Crooks in there as well, and Tavernier on the pitch all at the same time. But yeah, I think Bowler is a fair name to be said in regards to other contracted players that may not be, well, won't be surprises. Uche will be one, Chuba Rakpom, which is a name that we haven't heard all season because he's been out on loan.
Who?
I know, exactly. Chuba. So I think Chuba's an interesting one. With 1 year left on his contract, I think the main idea is that he'll go. But if Wilder sees something from him in pre-season, then you never know. Sammy Amiobi. Now that is definitely a who sort of question. Haven't seen him since he signed. Didn't even see him in pre-season last season. So yeah, we signed him on I think it was his 3-year deal, I think it was, which is just unbelievable.
Can we just now agree that in terms of, okay, value for money in terms of transfer fee, we probably had worse signings. But in terms of the wages we're probably paying to Sammy Amiobi, and, again, we have no idea what those are, but, most footballers are on pretty okay salaries. Is Sammy Amiobi the worst signing we've ever made?
Probably because he's still contracted to the football club and has not even made an appearance, probably in first team training. Yes, he's probably the worst signing ever. But again, unfortunate with his injury. We think, well, we know that he is injured. We don't know what injury it is, but simply just unfortunate. Another name that will come up is Darnell Fisher, who I thought when he came in, not last January, but the January before under Neil Warnock, I thought he looked relatively good. Under Warnock, I think the main thing that's remembered with Darnell Fisher is marking Todd Cantwell out the game at Norwich away behind closed doors. I thought he was brilliant on that afternoon. But again, unfortunate with an injury last summer that's kept him out all season. We don't know if Wilder will fancy taking a look at him in pre-season or whether he'll be shipped out. But yeah, they're just a few players there that have certainly been sort of bombed out the squad over the course of the season that I think everyone around Middlesbrough Football Club wouldn't really be shocked to see leave the football club.
Yeah, and I think, just one more talking point from that interview. I think Wilder pretty much outlined that Jed Spence's Middlesbrough career is over. I think we all kind of knew that anyway, but I think it was in context of talking about a potential budget and if he'll be backed. And I think he did mention, there's one specific player which will command a fee. And, I think it's pretty obvious who he was talking about in that situation. So that's another point just to draw upon. Just in terms of the interview, and at the time, of course, after such a disappointing result, I think massive credit's got to go to Chris Wilder because he could have quite easily, he said himself before he doesn't take defeat very well. He could have quite easily given brief answers, let sort of the season, fester out the way it did, and sort of, because as a manager, he's under. Okay, he's got responsibility to address the fans, but really after a defeat, he could have quite easily just left it at that, said it wasn't good enough, but we'll dust ourselves down. And, the typical sort of spiel that some managers do come out with, but he hit every sort of tick box that everyone would have wanted him to do following the full-time whistle, got everyone excited again. Of course, said that the rest was needed for the players, and rightfully so, but said planning's already underway. We're already excited to be talking to some good level of footballers, and, credit to him because it certainly got me excited, and I know it did with a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, it did. And I think the main thing that stood out to me was Wilder saying this is the beginning of a journey. Although he's been here 6 months and he had a transfer window where, yes, okay, he could only sign 2 players on permanent deals in Riley McGree and Caelan Boyd-Munce. But it's the start of a journey, and it feels like it is as well. We've had that sort of taster of what Chris Wilder and Alan Knill are looking to instill at the football club. And we could certainly tell that the squad at this current time wasn't that finished article at the minute. And that goes to showing the results over the last sort of 2 months, where in games where we probably look like we should go and win, we haven't pulled up any trees and we haven't put in the performances that we probably should have done. yeah, it feels like over the next 2-3 months or so, it's going to be big. There's going to be big changes. There's going to be plenty of players brought in, but also plenty of players that are going to be leaving the football club as well. But let's just hope that the signings that do come in, they get more right than wrong. I think it's fair to say that over the last few years we've got plenty wrong. But yeah, it's a big transfer window. We've seen the signs this season of improvement, and next season we need to kick on and turn that 7th into a 6th and above.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of course, players leaving the club, as you just mentioned there, because we have recorded this a little bit later on in the week than we would usually do, we are already aware of 3 players that will be departing. Any surprises from the retained list? Of course, I am referring to Lee Peltier, Neil Taylor, and Sol Bamba, whose contracts have come to an end. Were you slightly surprised with any, or did you sort of expect that to be the case?
Sort of expected it, if I'm honest. Of course, all the loan players return to their parent clubs as well. No shock there with any, if I'm honest.
You're joking, huh? Ria Saliki was going to get a 6-year deal.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, to be fair, he did score that banger the other week at Forest for the under-23s.
Yeah.
But yeah, hasn't worked out there with JLS. I think Barnsley away told us everything we need to know about JLS in the Championship. And then, of course, the centre forwards. We've had to sort of just put up with the centre forwards this season. And considering there's 5, it's simply not good enough that a team in and around that top 6 hasn't had a centre forward to rely on. I think every other club, well, every club in that playoffs at the minute has that man to rely on up front that scores the goals for them. And Middlesbrough haven't had that this season. I think that's a massive, massive issue that we need to look at in the summer transfer window. And I'm sure it will be looked at as well. But yeah, no shocks that any of the centre forwards departed. And hadn't had their loans either extended or signed on a permanent deal. But yeah, those permanent players, they were very much stopgaps, I think. You look at Neil Taylor, who was brought in on a free transfer in November on a short-term deal to January and proved his worth pretty much in those games around Christmas time, in the absence of Mark Bowler. I think Peltier being brought in was the most Neil Warnock signing ever. I think it's fair to say that. But I haven't got a bad word to say about any of them, any of them two. Both put their all in for the football club every single time they took to the field for us. Peltier just filled in wherever, whether it be right centre half, left wing back, right wing back. He played anywhere, which was fantastic. And he gave us some funny moments as well and some good moments as well with that penalty at Old Trafford. And of course, Sol Bamba. I mean, I don't really have the words to describe what I feel for that man, but what a man, really. A rock at the back, but a fantastic, gentle giant at heart as well. I think it's fair to say with his interviews on BBC Tees and on other platforms as well. A credit to himself and a credit to this football club. And yeah, none of those 3 are going to be watching this podcast or listening. But if they are, thank you very much for your services for the football club.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it better, to be fair. Peltier, I mean, almost become a bit of a sort of cult figure towards the end of the season. I think for the betting fans who may be listening, an absolute cert for a yellow card if you're ever betting on that. If he goes to another team, get your yellow cards on Pelt. But yeah, as you say, filled in wherever, whenever needed. I was fully expecting him to come on in goal, to be honest, against Preston, just for a laugh. Of course, Neil Taylor, probably, I think you could argue, a little bit unlucky to actually lose his place to Bowler. During our most successful period of the season, he started week in, week out. Some really good performances in that cup run as well. And, best wishes to him. Of course, Sol Bamba, like you say, I don't think, given that, we don't want this podcast to go on for 7 hours, we can't possibly fit in all of the nice things we'd like to say about that man. Comes in to get his fitness up after a horrific time in his life. Not only beats that, gets himself fit again, comes on in a pre-season game. I believe, I'm stretching my mind back, I think it may have been Plymouth. York. Produces probably one of the most brutal / veteran, unbelievable challenges in a pre-season friendly. And at that moment, I just thought, get the contract out and let him sign whatever he wants. And from that moment on, produced probably one of the best individual defensive performances in recent memory. Sheffield United at home was just heading bricks out the stadium that day. I think he would have headed pretty much anything you could possibly throw at him, blocked everything. And of course, speaking of penalties, Sol, if you are listening, I'd happily admit, when you stepped up at Old Trafford, I thought it was lights out. How wrong was I? Because you just calm as you like, smashed it in the bottom corner and walked off as if to say, what was everyone worrying about? And just, as you say, an unbelievable human. And I think, as we said on Twitter, whether he likes it or not, he'll forever be an adopted Teessider now, because I think it's quite unheard of, really, for someone that has only been at the club for a year is going to be so fondly remembered, and again, has probably made himself almost, I think the legend, the word legend's probably banded about a little bit too easily, but actually, when you apply the context of what he went through and the performances that he put up at the age he did, certainly it could fit some people's description of a legend. And what a man. Hope that him especially, of course, all our best wishes to Peltz and Taylor, but whatever Sol Bamba goes on to do next, then of course we hope he does whatever he wants, and he should do. He deserves that, certainly, after the life he's had. Just another point, moving on from that, just going back, actually, and I don't know why I'm doing it myself, what I felt we missed. The front two for Preston probably showed why we are where we ended up in the table, because actually that was probably the difference in the afternoon. One, they played the system better, but as you briefly touched on it just before, their forwards were exceptional. And I felt like we've got to mention it, because actually we didn't. We sort of made out that it was all our downfall, but actually Archer and Reece up front, I just have to say, were exceptional for Preston on the afternoon.
Yeah, they were. And just to sort of continue on my point from a minute ago or so, about teams in and around us in the division all having centre forwards that they can rely on. Even sides down the bottom of the division have centre forwards that they can rely on. You look at Bristol City, got Andreas Fireman and Antoine Semenyo up front, who've scored like 30 goals between them. I don't think our centre forwards have scored like 20 between them, and there's all 5 of them. So it's unbelievable, really. Preston, being mid-table for most of the season, Emil Reece has scored 20 plus goals in the division. In fact, I think that his hat-trick, 2.5 goals, took it over that 20 goal accolade for the season. And then the number of teams below us in the division that have centre forwards that they can rely on, and that I think it's fair to say just more complete centre forwards than the ones that have been at Middlesbrough Football Club this season is quite massive, really. It's that and goalkeeper are the two positions that I'm going to be keeping a keen eye on when it comes to transfer rumours over the next few months or so. I think that those two are massive for us going into next season.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to the next part of this, of course, we've still got plenty to talk about, given that it is our end of season podcast. On to questions now. Quite an interesting question coming from Jordan, actually, which I really liked. And he said, if Preston and Middlesbrough's teams were combined, how many players from each team would get into it? I guess we'll go from keeper, and I think that's probably an obvious one, given that we're supposedly now after Preston's goalkeeper from Saturday. Everson gets in the team. And then I think, again, the two strikers are in, so there's three.
That's as far as I'd say, really. They're the three main ones that come to mind. Goalkeeper speaks for itself, considering we're linked to him now. And centre forwards just offered so much more on Saturday afternoon than what ours did. You look at Reece chasing down the channel for that second goal and not giving up a fight, although two players were around him. And yeah, there is a slice of luck that he sort of flicks it in between the pair of them, but the idea is there and he executed it well. And to score 20 plus goals in the division is no mean feat, because we've seen centre forwards at Middlesbrough over the past few years that haven't got anywhere near touching 20 goals a season. One of them costing 15 million quid, not touching 20 goals a season. 7 million quid, not touching 20 goals a season. And I don't know how much Emil Reece cost Preston, but I can't imagine it to be more than two. Yeah. So it just goes to show that there are players out there that, I suppose, if you want to class them as gems, that you can uncover, that can do the job in this division up front. But yeah, I think if you mix the teams together, the three that stand out are their centre forwards and their goalkeeper, because I think it's fair to say that our defence and midfield haven't cost us a lot this season, but in terms of finishing chances and keeping balls out of our own net, they've been our main downfall, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. And just another point on that front too. I think the big thing for me was that, okay, yes, they're individually both brilliant players, but also they complement each other as a pair. And I think one thing that we've massively lacked, okay, both individualism up top and, you know, any ability to find a pair. And not once have I watched a front two play for, and I mean, probably look at it and think it's not really surprising that we didn't, you know, our forwards don't score many goals, because not once have I watched any pairing throughout the gazillion changes that we had in that front two, and thought, yeah, they look like they could work quite well together. Preston's front two worked as a pair, and, you know, ultimately that's what cost us, and that's why they ran us ragged all afternoon. But enough on Preston's team. I think that answers the question, though, as to the combined team. Moving on from that, there was a question about goalkeeper situation that come in from Midge. I think we've kind of covered that. I think we all sort of know that we need a replacement in between the sticks. And two last questions, arguably Middlesbrough related, but I thought since it's the end of the season, we'll stick them in anyway. Nathan, the Borough Memories account on Twitter asked, have you got any idea if Chris Wilder is in any way related to the heavyweight boxer Deontay Wilder? Have you got an answer for that?
I'm not quite sure, but I kind of wish that Chris Wilder was dishing out a few right hooks in that dressing room after that performance on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm glad that you said that because do you know what? I wasn't sure how you were going to answer that, and I actually couldn't have come up with that quick on the spot. So fair play, because that was a very good answer. I mean, there may be a connection somewhere down the line. We're not sure, but yeah, as you say, probably a few players probably could have done with a swift right hook. So I hope that answers the question for Borough Memories. Finally, Danny, not even. Do you know what? This question wasn't even related to Middlesbrough at all, or even football, to be honest, which is quite funny, but also I love it. We never specify it has to be about Middlesbrough questions, so by all means, send us whatever you like from now on. Danny asked, will there ever be a boy born who could swim faster than a shark? And Nathan, I'm going to put that one to you again.
Leroy Sané, because of his dive at the Riverside a few years ago.
I mean, yeah, it was. It was a canny dive, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Can he swim faster than a shark, though?
Well, considering Man City got that thing where they call themselves the Shark Team.
Yeah, that weird sort of Shark Team thing.
Yeah, I think if you want to class them as sharks, he's probably the quickest one out of all of them anyway. Or he was.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I'd say possibly.
I think he may be referring to The Office here now. Nathan, I don't know if you're a big fan of the Office, but I believe Gareth gets asked this question. And for me, I mean, it's quite ridiculous that I'm really taking time to even consider this question. More analysis has actually gone into this question than any other football question, believe it or not. Gonna have to be a no, unfortunately. Although, who knows? I can't rule it out for definite, so who knows, Danny? But I hope that answered your question. Surrounding the shark and fast swimmers being born situation. That is all of our questions from this podcast. But now we move on to the end of season Boropolis Awards. I mean, we haven't really come dressed for an award ceremony, but we're in shirt and tie. I've been looking forward to this for a few weeks, to be fair. So we have the following categories. Of course, there's already been the official Middlesbrough Awards, but we thought we'd do our own. So the following categories are Player of the Season, Young Player of the Season, Goal of the Season, Moment of the Season, Best Opposition Player to Play Against Us Award, the Disappointment of the Season, that could be a player or a specific game, and also the final award, a player to look out for next season who, for whatever reason you may think hit the ground. It might be a youngster, it might be someone that you think is going to leave, who we might not expect. So firstly, Nathan, Player of the Season, the Boropolis Player of the Season award. It's a prestigious award, but who was your vote for Player of the Season?
Well, there's a toss-up between two.
You can't give two answers.
I'm not going to give two answers,
okay.
But I'm going to say Johnny Howson is a very, very, very close second. Of course, he was given the actual Player of the Season at Middlesbrough, but I'm going to go and throw out another name that, if people listen to this podcast and have done since the start of the season, they'll know that I haven't always been as appreciative of this player as many have in the past. But since Chris Wilder's came into this football club, this lad has just been an absolute revelation, really, in the way that he's changed his role in this Middlesbrough side. And of course, I'm chatting about Marcus Tavernier. Even on that final day at Preston, where he scores that goal, he looks to lift the spirits. and at full time, where Wilder gathered all the players in the centre circle to sort of give a debrief of the game in front of the fans. Before that had been organised, Tavernier was already in front of that away end, applauding them for their support. And there was sort of a minor chant created. He needs a proper one. He really does need a proper one. That's something that needs sorting out desperately. But as a player this season, absolutely fantastic, really. Finding himself in that left side of central midfield alongside Johnny Howson and Matt Crooks. I think they all complement each other fantastically well, which helps Tavernier thrive in that role. But his energy is just an absolute joke. His recovery runs are a joke. On the ball, composed, sometimes tries to do too much, but I think that that's okay at times. But versatile, can play anywhere, literally anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in goal at some point next season if we had a crisis. But yeah, right wing back, right midfield, left wing back, left midfield, central midfield, can play off the striker if he wanted to. Just unbelievable. And in terms of his improvement, I think that just makes him player of the season. Honourable mention, I say, to Johnny Howson, who's been, again, unbelievable. That performance in midfield against Tottenham in the FA Cup was probably the best midfield performance I've ever seen from a Middlesbrough player. But Tavernier just pips it, and the goals have started to come. He started to stand up and be counted a bit more. Of course, got that goal at Preston at the weekend, got that goal at Cardiff a few weeks ago, and the story in the build-up to that game as well, where he was taken off against Swansea and he said he wanted to play no matter what on Wednesday, and he could hardly walk in the days before it, but still played 90 minutes and still sort of took the burden off others in that side, took the pressure off and scored that goal in a big game. He stood up and been counted this season, and full credit to him. He's been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think I've seen a few shouts for Tavernier in the actual awards, but in terms of the Boropolis awards, I guess we can't really take it to a vote, can we? Because there's two of us, so it's always unless we both agree, it's always going to go to a vote. So I guess we'll do two individual awards. Nathan's Boropolis Player of the Year, Marcus Tavernier. For me, I agree with the official club awards. For me, I know you just mentioned him as a very close second, but in terms of throughout the season, Johnny Howson, I think a mixture of everything. His age, his ability to just get on with his job. I think I'm no football manager, but as a football manager, I think he is really one of those players where the thought of Johnny Howson just doesn't cross their mind. He does everything superbly well. I remember listening to an interview that he did with Yusuf a few seasons back now. And he said, "Oh, well, I'm getting at the stage now where if I'm in the gym and I see one of the younger lads, it just makes me think, well, I need to do more because I need to still be at that level to play at championship level." And to be honest, he's playing at championship level. I genuinely believe for some Premier League sides, he could probably still do a job in the Premier League. And I honestly do believe that. And as you say, some massive standout performances, but that monstrous effort against Tottenham, I'd love some sort of access to the heart rate monitor that he was wearing, because he probably covered the distance of the whole of Middlesbrough back to Newcastle, another lap round Middlesbrough, up to Tottenham and back down again. Because up to Tottenham, I should say down to Tottenham, my geography slightly off there, so apologies for that. But you know what? You know where I was getting at. yeah, just remarkable. And of course, we haven't mentioned yet, out of the players that were running out of contract, he has been offered a new deal. So excellent news from that point. Yeah, Johnny Howson. I mean, there's that chant that he used to be shite, now he's all right. Okay, when he first joined, it didn't work out, but for 3 or 4 seasons now, he's consistently been one of our best players. And yet again, I actually think, like a fine wine, he seems to be getting better with age, to be honest. So, Johnny Howson, you haven't only picked up Middlesbrough's official Player of the Year, you've also picked up my Boropolis Player of the Year award, which I'm sure will mean far much more to you than the official award. Moving on to the next category, Young Player of the Season, Nathan. I think you could possibly argue, Tav sneaks into that category, but
Yeah.
I think given that he won Player of the Season from your end, we'll miss him out for this one.
Yeah.
More Young Player of the Season, I should say.
Isaiah Jones, enough said, really. Coming in at the side at the start of the season on that opening day at Fulham on the bench, no one expected him to make any sort of impact. Neil Warnock took a risk in the game at 1-0 down, brought Isaiah Jones on, and he slides the ball through to Mark Bowler, who finishes it perfectly, gets us back into the game, and Isaiah Jones hasn't looked back since, has he? Played off the left a few times under Neil Warnock, found himself coming into a right wing-back role towards the end of Neil Warnock's tenure, actually, but mainly under Chris Wilder. And since Wilder came in, he just flourished, didn't he, in that role. Defensively, solid, which he probably hasn't really been asked to do throughout his career so far. Defending 1v1, comfortable defensively, 1v1 going forward, offensively, just frightening. I'd hate to be stood up against him, as he just sort of did a million step overs in front of me and took me down the line. It'd just be horrible. Delivery, fantastic, pretty much on the money every single time. His numbers that he's put up this season and in his breakout season in the Championship have been exceptional. It should have been way more as well, but they don't count on goals in the actual statistics. Unfortunately, only got 1 goal against Swansea, which was an important goal, won us the game, got us valuable 3 points, but wish we could have seen a bit more in terms of that metric. But yeah, in the last few weeks as well, slightly quiet in terms of the standards that he set, but with a bit of rest over the next few months and a bit more coaching in that position, we've got one hell of a player. And certainly in the absence of Jed Spence as well, and all the talk of how well Jed's been playing at Nottingham Forest, it's sort of been not that important how well Spence has been playing because of how well Jones has been playing at Middlesbrough. And now we're in a situation where Spence is going to be leaving the football club for a sizable fee, and we have his replacement ready, already at the football club, already playing in this system under Chris Wilder, and knows what Chris Wilder wants from him. So for that, Isaiah Jones, Young Player of the Year.
Yeah, the first one that we're going to agree on, the conclusive Young Player of the Year in the Boropolis Awards, Isaiah Jones. A special mention to Josh Coburn. You know, he had his moments as a young striker. Probably, of course, didn't quite get the amount of minutes that would warrant this award, I don't feel. But certainly, as a young player, he's done terrific this season. But yeah, I think the only winner was Isaiah Jones. As you say, around Christmas, going into the new year, where, as I said, I think it was our best period. He just seemed to pluck assists out when he felt like it, to be honest. He just was putting cross upon cross upon cross onto the feet of whoever he was aiming for, or head, I should say. And I think that there was only one winner. And on the point that you made, a few people have mentioned how he sort of slowed down since he had COVID after sort of the last few weeks. But I think, for a young player who's playing his first professional season in football, in the highest level he's ever played at, it's been incredible, the performances and consistency of performance that he's put up. And I think, as you say, a well-deserved rest he's going to get during the summer, straight back in for pre-season. And who knows, we might even see even higher levels of performance from him next season. I'm sure that he'll certainly be hoping for that. So, Young Player of the Season, Isaiah Jones. Next award, Goal of the Season. Now, I mean, we don't really have a list of contenders for this, so you're going to have to just use your memory on the spot unless you've already thought about this. But Goal of the Season, away you go, Nathan.
Ryan Yates, Middlesbrough v Nottingham Forest, Boxing Day. Nah, I'm joking. Although it was a fantastic finish, to be fair. Goal of the season for sort of the occasion, for the story that the FA Cup threw up on that night. Josh Coburn against Spurs. I mean, the club gave that as well as the goal of the season. But yeah, what a finish from him. Just sent it into orbit in the top corner past Hugo Lloris. Unbelievable finish, unbelievable story that a homegrown player who has only broken through in the last sort of year or so scores the winner against Premier League Tottenham Hotspur, Antonio Conte's Tottenham Hotspur. And it wasn't just Tottenham Hotspur reserves either, was it? It was full Kane, Son, Kulusevski, the ones that are fighting for Champions League this evening. So yeah, for the goal alone, for the finish, Josh Coburn, I think it's fair to say that's a fantastic finish and goal of the season.
Yeah, I think, do you know what? We've actually agreed on another thing in the awards. So we have another conclusive winner for this award. Yeah, for me, Josh Coburn again. As you say, I mean, not only the fact that it was a academy product, past a World Cup winning goalkeeper against Premier League opposition in the FA Cup. I mean, I'm surprised he didn't have to replace the netting, because I'd be surprised if Josh Coburn throughout his career strikes a ball as sweet as that ever again. And don't get me wrong, fantastic striker, great finisher from everything that we've seen. But, I mean, that strike is ridiculous. The power generated, it's ridiculous. It's not only a great finish, but for the moment in itself. And from a personal point of view as well, I was doing commentary for that game at the stadium. And I think, to be honest, my voice is still just about recovering from my reaction to that goal. I was sitting in the press box, and honestly, I must have got some. I mean, of course, the stadium erupted, but I must have got some funny looks when that went in. I was just the non-biased commentator in me completely evaporated, and I just turned into any old Sky Sports fan zone-esque commentator. Completely lost it. Love the moment. Always will do. I've got the clip on my phone still. It was, yeah, from a personal point of view, but also from a unbelievable finish narrative in the FA Cup. I think, yeah, again, probably there was only ever going to be one winner, in fairness. From goal of the season, we move on to moment of the season. This can be anything you like, Nathan. It can be something that you didn't even, not everyone in the stadium saw. It can be some food at a stadium. It can be a day out. Whatever you want this moment of the season to be, it can go to that. So
Well, I'm going to actually throw up a proper moment of the season
right.
for an actual game.
Okay.
Being in this away end was incredible, really, and really probably struck everyone down with COVID after it as well, and the full squad. So Blackpool away at Christmas, what a fantastic away day that was. Everything that you want to go and be a football fan for, really. Blackpool, I mean, it's English Vegas anyway. It's an absolute fantastic place. I'm joking, but yeah. Went to the ground on that. I think it was a Wednesday night, hoping for something, and really credit to Blackpool because they've only just been promoted and they've gave us two fantastic games this season. They weren't quite the pushover that I thought they were going to be in either game. And yeah, Borough go 1-0 up. Spurra, fantastic finish. That away end at Blackpool as well is I think it was meant to be temporary. At the time it got built when they were in the Premier League a few years ago.
Yeah.
And it just hasn't been sort of improved upon since. So it's not. It feels like the floor below you is made of plywood.
Yeah.
It's not sturdy at all, and it felt like the stand was going to collapse when we scored first. Of course, Spurra whips his top off, and they're celebrating in front of the away end. And then in the least sort of Borough few minutes, well, the sort of typical Borough and then least typical Borough few minutes ever, we concede in the 90th minute with Shane Lavery scoring, and the away end's just completely deflated. And within a minute, we go up the other end in the 94th minute. Again, young player of the season, Isaiah Jones, winning that ball in a 1v1 down that right-hand side for Borough, striding forward into the box. Uche knocks everyone out the way, and it leaves Duncan Watmore free to tap home. And the scenes after that were just unbelievable. I don't think the players knew what to do with themselves. Crooksy ran behind the goal and was shushing the Blackpool end. Isaiah Jones ran to the opposite corner. Duncan Watmore ran to Isaiah Jones and then went, oh, wait, we'll go over at the fans instead. Bamba was already pretty much in the crowd. There was that yellow jacket guy who everyone kept watching. He stood out. But yeah, just an absolutely ridiculous away game that I think it sent Borough into the playoffs that night. And yeah, it just sort of teed us up nicely for a weird few days following, where Sheffield United and we'll rewind that. The EFL throw up one of the biggest jokes of a few hours I've ever had to sit and experience watching Middlesbrough, where Borough come out and say we have absolutely no players, and the EFL come out with the idea of, well, you have to recall every single loan player that you've got then. Sorry, what? Like, just what are you even talking about? But yeah, for that day alone, Blackpool away, moment of the season, Duncan Watmore's 90th minute winner.
Yeah, just touching on that, it's completely slipped my memory, caught me off guard a little bit. That day when the EFL seemingly, you kind of forget that was this season, that the EFL seemingly just thought, well, we've probably cancelled a few too many games. We're going to have to put our foot down shortly. And then lo and behold, they just chose Middlesbrough that day. Eventually went back on it, but I think at one stage during that day, me and you were starting in midfield on the early kickoff, weren't we?
Yeah, we were. I think we were. A few clips surfaced on the Boropolis page of me and you scoring a few bangers, and yeah, I think me and you were in midfield with probably Rory, I think.
Yeah. I think Yusuf was up top. I can't remember the rest of the team, to be honest, but certainly that midfield never looked stronger, to be honest, from my memory. So that's not my moment of the season, but it was very funny. I have a toss-up between two. So I can't give the award out to two people, so I've got to really think about this one here. I'll tell you the two first, and then I'll make a decision as during the time that I'm telling you. So, first of all, okay, probably in the grand scheme of things, wasn't our biggest result ever, but in terms of an individual moment, Martin Piero away at Cardiff. We'd waited all summer for this man to get into the team. I think we said early on in the podcast this season that there'll be one moment, at least one moment, where he scores a good goal and we all just think he's arrived, he's here. And although second half of the season it didn't quite work out for Piero, I just remember being absolutely delighted. We'd spent all summer waiting for him to sign. It took us about 8 months to actually get the deal over the line. Everyone thought that some Italian club were going to jump in ahead of us. We were then tracking his Instagram whilst he was isolating from COVID. He eventually signed, and obviously we got that moment away at Cardiff. Excellent goal as well. And then the other one, Crooks away at Man United, really sticks out for me. Not so much even the penalty shootout, just the fact that I think Crooks had done a lot of the press prior to the game, spoke about the fact that he was a Manchester United fan. I never actually realised that him and Watmore had been released from Manchester United earlier on in their lives. And just because of the fact it got off to such a terrible start, of course, conceding so early on, then the most un-Borough thing, Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't hit the target from a penalty. And then, I mean, we'd sat back, we really clung on until half time. And then the moment where one's lofted over the top, excellent pass by Isaiah Jones, by the way. Duncan Watmore might as well get out one of them foam fingers that they wear at the baseball, stick it up in the air, smashes off his hand. The most blatant handball I've probably ever seen. And just dinks one over at the back post. And obviously Crooksy's there, stabs it in, flies over at the away end. And from not even like I know Matt Crooks, but just because of the fact that a boy of Man United fan, I mean, we'll touch on what you've just drank out of there after this award. Runs over the away fans, puts us level in the game. Remarkable, just an unbelievable night and an unbelievable moment. But I can tell you're dying to get a cough out, Nathan. So I will let you.
Could feel myself there as you're speaking.
Are we all good?
I think so, just about. A bit croaky now.
Yeah, you're just getting emotional about the awards. It's all right, mate. So, yeah, although it was a magical night in the FA Cup, I'm going to give it a Piero because at the time there was a little bit of uncertainty around Warnock, and I seem to remember thinking, well, actually, we've picked up a few wins, yeah, but that was when I was already sort of to the point where, and talking about disengaged, of course, I'd never, ever, ever not want Middlesbrough to do well, but just didn't feel that real connection. It sort of, recruitment was going one way, Warnock quite clearly wasn't too on board with it. And then Martin Piero, the Argentinian, this is when this chant was still first coming onto the scene as well. Takes it around Cardiff defence, fires in with his weak foot, and I just remember seeing his face run off, him and Crooks with that little bromance in midfield. As I said, not a huge moment in terms of defining our season, but just a moment that I really, really enjoyed watching live on Sky as well. That would be my moment of the season. potentially worst object to drink water out of during a podcast award. I've got to go to you now, because is that a jug that I've just seen you drinking?
Yeah, it would be a jug. Yeah, it would be. Get my hydration in.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad you're getting your hydration in, but I mean, you could at least. I suppose I've been in that situation. We're both, well, I say we're both uni students. I've just finished university. You've still got a year left, so you can kind of get away with it when you're in second year.
Just about get away with it.
So you've got that award. Next award, not Middlesbrough related, but certainly against Middlesbrough, if that makes sense. Best opposition player to play against us. I think this probably goes to a individual performance against us. Nathan, I think we've spoken. Half of the fan base kind of already thinks that we're going to sign this player, and I'm not sure why, because he's certainly got quite a hefty price tag on his head, I'm sure. Possibly due to his comments after the game, Chris Wilder, of course, talking about how well this specific player played. I think we both know who this award's going to go to, but I'll let you tell the listeners and the viewers who this award goes to.
Yeah, it goes to Coventry's Victor Gyökeres up front. I think that'll get a few nibbles from Coventry Twitter as well. But yeah, at the Riverside, fantastic performance from a centre forward. Although he didn't score on the day, just complete centre forward performance. Held the ball up really well. Laid it off to the players running around him. O'Hare and Shipley that day. Laying it off one touch, moving in behind. Sometimes he'd roll Dale Fry. Sometimes he'd let the ball run through his legs and run round him. Fantastic performance from a centre forward. I think mainly these opposition player, the best opposition players to sort of play against us this season will be centre forwards that are named because of how envious we are that other teams have them and we don't have centre forwards that do the business. Another one that I'd say is Billy Sharp as well for his performance at Bramall Lane. Joke of a centre forward. Just for the first goal, rolled Dale Fry, put the ball in the box, 1-0, runs through with Gibbs White for the second, scores again, gives Jib to the Borough fans at Bramall Lane as well. Always scores against Middlesbrough. Just, yeah, one of them centre forwards in the division that always scores goals. So, yeah, Gyökeres and Sharp, they're my best opposition players to play against us.
Yeah, I think for opposition player, for me, like you say, he didn't score on the day, but certainly, I always don't know if to call him Gyökeres or Gyökeres.
Who knows?
Who knows? But I'm praising him, so he shouldn't mind if he is listening in. I mean, he may be if he's just readying himself for the move next season.
He loves Parmos.
Yeah, I mean that is speculation that is completely false, but it might not be false. He may have caught a taste for them whilst he was up for the away trip. But yeah, I think that award, in fairness, most of the fan base are already aware of how good he was that day and what an excellent season he's had for Coventry. Moving on from that award, disappointment of the season, a little bit of a downbeat award. Of course, we don't want to finish on there is one more award after this. We don't want to finish on a negative, but in terms of possibly a signing, I think we would probably look at for this award. Have you had a real disappointment of the season?
In terms of signings, I can give you two. One's in the goalkeeper position and would flap at pretty much everything, and the other one in midfield is named after a band.
Yeah,
just haven't worked out at all, and we had to persist with Lumley, unfortunately, for most of the season, which wasn't his fault. But yeah, just disappointing in the fact that you look at the mistakes and you just think, how are you making such costly errors week upon week, and it hasn't been sort of solved yet. We had the opportunity to do it in January, chose not to, and from then on, it cost us a lot more points. And with Saliki as well, came here having played in the Champions League last season, and unfortunately offered nothing. If you wanted to talk about a disappointment of the season in terms of anything else, just Barnsley away, really stinking. That's the only word I've got to describe that.
Yeah, I think I've probably got to agree with you there. For me, I think in terms of an individual player, like you say, probably JLS. You know, produced some absolute belters back in the day, JLS. Obviously not the midfielder that we signed from on loan from Rennes. On the midfield that we signed, and not the band that produced some old school disco classics. Like you say, it just didn't work out. I don't really think his fitness ever really looked like something that was there. Okay, he went away and represented his international team in the Africa Cup of Nations, and you know, he come with quite a lot of praise and pedigree from the French league, who a lot of people thought was seen as a bit of a coup at the time, and you know, for whatever reason, it didn't quite work out. Warnock was very clear about the fact that his fitness just wasn't quite there, and then really once the midfield was established under Wilder, I don't think he stood much of a chance, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, that Barnsley away day where he come into midfield, I don't think probably helped his favour. But yeah, I think biggest disappointment for me would have to be JLS. Moving on to our penultimate award, because I've just thought of another award which I'm going to spring on you, as I like to do, just to make you think on your feet. The second last award, player to look out for next year. It's not quite an award, but just a look ahead to someone, one individual person that you're thinking next season is going to be your year.
I think that Coburn will have a good season next season. He'll probably feature a few more times than he has this season, and will probably have a bit more of an impact. He'll sort of fill into his body a bit more and be a bit more of a handful for centre halves in the division that he's up against. So I'd say Josh Coburn, but if I was being funny, I'd say pick any centre forward that you want that we've been linked to. Scott Twine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a few Middlesbrough fans think it's already signed, sealed and delivered, to be honest.
Must be.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't look a bad signing on paper, but of course, nothing's done yet. So we'll wait and see with that one. For me, I would give this to Isaiah Jones. I think we saw incredible levels from him during that period of the season. And of course, towards the end of the season, I think, you know, his performances did slightly dip a little bit. But for a first season in professional football, playing it in the championship level, you know, exceptional. And I honestly believe with a full pre-season behind him, you know, as you say, further coaching in that role, in that position, I think he could just increase his value by another God knows how much. And, you know, that's not the be all and end all for us. It's what he produces for Middlesbrough Football Club. But I truly believe that there's a real star there to I mean, I guess you could call this season his breakout season, but really establish himself as one of the, you know, real exciting prospect right wing back in, I think you could argue, English football, to be honest. I genuinely think he's that good. And yeah, I think that rounds up the awards for what we had planned. Throughout our answers, I did think of one more award. And it is, I guess you can't pinpoint an exact number for this because I'd be slightly concerned if you had remembered each individual episode. But favorite podcast moment?
Favorite podcast moment?
From this
Well,
year, because of course we need to reflect on it a little bit once we've done this, but of course this was our first season doing this, and we've got to this point. we finished the season. We didn't sack it off halfway through, but yeah, favorite podcast moment of the year.
I'd just sort of say since Wilder's come in, really, because it's been more enjoyable to talk about. And I know that's quite awful to say, but it's been nice to talk about wins. But just sort of week on week, it's got more comfortable to speak because we hadn't done this sort of thing before. So I think when we first started, I think both of us were looking to sort of be confident, but at times we possibly weren't as quite as confident as we may have wanted to be. But I think we've both sort of gained sort of a relationship doing this where we sort of bounce off each other quite well. We sort of have similar ideas in terms of things. So I'd just say the season as a whole, really, since Wilder came in, I think that's where the confidence in ourselves as well sort of began to ooze out a little bit more, because we were talking about happier things and winning games and better football, I suppose.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's certain. Yes, as you say. It started off as something that we didn't really know how it would be received, and it's certainly got and there's been so much support, really nice comments throughout the season of people listening from different locations, even just engaging and sending in questions. There's no need for people to engage and give us questions to answer, because at the end of the day, by no means we're experts, but we certainly are very avid fans that just like talking about Middlesbrough. So yeah, certainly I agree with you, said from a podcast point of view rather than a season point of view. I think obviously the Dimmy interview was brilliant. Our first podcast guest, and of course we remain all the time to be working on getting new guests on, and fingers crossed we'll have a few of them during the summer. But I feel like for Middlesbrough fans of our age especially, to get a promotion winner on, and in fairness to Dimmy, was so open, had some really funny moments throughout that. Of course, his son really just wanted to get in on the camera. And good shuttle with his son wanting to have his guest appearance. But yeah, to speak to Dimmy was obviously fantastic. And as I say, for Middlesbrough fans our age, not so long ago was Borough's number one. So that was, I think that would be my moment of the season, definitely.
Yeah, it's been an enjoyable season nonetheless as well. Since the start of the season, 2 managers. How many podcasts is it now?
34, I believe it was.
34 podcasts finished and completed. I dread to think how many hours the podcasts actually amount to. Just me and you absolutely just waffling a lot of rubbish about Middlesbrough. But yeah, it's been enjoyable, and we'll 100% be back next season. And well, throughout this summer as well, really, with transfer breakdowns and things like that. But yeah, for now, there's a season finished.
First season of the Boropolis podcast ticked off. Who'd have thought? I mean, that week, not to say it was a highlight, because you never like to see managers losing the jobs, but the week of Neil Warnock losing his job and Chris Wilder coming in, that was one podcast where no one really saw it coming. After that West Brom game, of course. But just from me, Nathan, of course, I'm sure you would like to say something as well. Considering first year we've done this, I'd just like to say a massive, massive thank you for the support that you've received. For the first year doing this, as I say, we never claim to be experts in this, but we just love talking about Middlesbrough. And any listens or views on YouTube, even if it was 10 people listening to it, it still means just as much. But the sport's been really great. So thank you very much from me. Nathan, I'll let you end it on a thank you as well, mate.
Yeah, just reiterating what you said there. Thanks everyone for listening and watching over the past season, really. First time doing this sort of thing. It's been interesting to do. I think we've both gained confidence from doing it as well. Hopefully we're enjoyable to listen to, and when we're not whining about defeats, we're actually sort of just a bit of entertainment for people on like an evening walk or when they're at the gym or something. So yeah, thank you all for listening. Hopefully we'll have some more support from you all next season as well.
Yeah, well, I think that wraps up that episode. It's been a long one, a hopefully enjoyable podcast to wrap up this season. As we say, we will be back next season. Whether that's good news or bad news to the people that might be listening or viewing is another matter altogether. But we certainly will be. Of course, we'll be trying our best to secure some guests during the summer. We'll have transfer updates. We should say, of course, follow all our socials. Twitter is the main one, but that is something we do want to increase next season across all media platforms. So keep an eye out for that. And I think, Nathan, that's us done. So from myself and Nathan, once more, thank you ever so much. We got through the full thing and I hadn't made a mistake, and I say it on the final line. Disappointing, Nathan. We'll go again. Thank you ever so much, not much, for listening and watching throughout the season. That has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast, and hopefully we see you again soon.